You never truly know someone until you live with them, but sometimes even then, it's too late. When I was 22, I landed a job in downtown Chicago. I was still living in Naperville, but there was no way I could handle that commute every day. So moving into the city was a must. Only problem? I didn't have much money saved up yet. One day, I saw a listing on a Facebook housing group for a bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Logan Square area. The rent was suspiciously low, but I figured I'd take a chance and go see it. I arranged a visit the next day. The guy who showed me around introduced himself as Sean, the owner. He gave me a quick tour of the place. He was a bit off, like weirdly shy and awkward, but I didn't really care. I just needed a place. There was one catch, though. I'd have a roommate. Sean told me the guy was named Dylan and described him as quiet, keeps to himself, which actually sounded perfect to me. Sean knocked on Dylan's door, said something like, "You want to come out and say hey?" No answer. Sean shrugged it off, saying Dylan might be asleep. We moved on to the living room where I said I was interested. I filled out a paper application, and Sean called me the next morning to say the room was mine. I moved in the following week. My uncle helped me haul in my mattress, clothes, and a desk. We made a bit of noise getting everything in, and we could clearly hear someone moving around behind Dylan's door, but he never came out to introduce himself. Not once. That was when I first realized that Dylan probably wasn't going to be social at all. After my uncle left, I sat on my mattress and pulled out my laptop to watch some YouTube. A little while later, I heard Dylan's door creak open, then the front door slammed shut. This was the first time he had left his room since I got there, so I figured it was my moment to say hi. I got up and walked toward the living room, but no one was there. He was already gone. It was weird, but whatever. I went back to my room, made some instant noodles, and eventually knocked out. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of the front door closing again. Then came footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps across the hardwood floor, stopping right outside my door. I sat up in bed, staring at the crack under the door. I could see the outline of feet standing there. He just stood there. Not knocking, not saying anything, just standing, and I didn't have a lock on my door. I was afraid he might try to come in. But eventually, the footsteps retreated, and I heard Dylan's door close again. I barely slept the rest of the night. Thuds and soft scraping sounds kept coming from his room. I had no idea what he was doing in there. I thought about confronting him the next day, but I hadn't even met the guy yet, so I decided to give it time. In the morning, the apartment was silent. Dylan was already gone, or at least his door was shut and the light was off. I spent the day out getting groceries and some essentials from Target. When I got back in the evening, I dumped the bags on the couch and made dinner. Still no sign of Dylan. At one point, I ran down to the corner Walgreens to grab toothpaste. When I came back, I noticed Dylan's door was open just a crack. The light was on. I figured it was finally time to meet him, but I walked over, knocked twice, and gently pushed the door open. What I saw or didn't see sent chills through me. The room was completely empty, and no bed, no dresser, not even a trash can. Just one old plastic chair, like the kind from a public school, sitting alone in the corner. That was it. I felt nauseous. I reached out and flicked off the light, then shut the door. My whole body was shaking. Was Dylan even real? I decided to call Sean and ask him what was going on. I dialed his number, and that's when I heard it. A loud buzzing sound coming from my closet. The ringtone matched. I froze. The call rang twice, and then went to voicemail, which meant he was in my closet. I backed away from the closet door, ran into the bathroom, locked myself in, and called 911. The cops arrived in under 10 minutes. I met them at the door, freaking out. They searched the whole apartment. Sure enough, they found Sean, the so-called landlord, hiding under my bed. I tried pressing charges, tried getting out of my lease, but as it turned out, there was no lease. Sean wasn't even the landlord. He didn't own the apartment. I still don't know how he got the keys or who Dylan was supposed to be, or if he ever existed. My uncle came the next day and helped me move all my stuff back home. I found a new place within a week, but the whole experience shook me to my core. I had a weird gut feeling about Sean from the beginning, but I never could have imagined the nightmare that followed. There was a listing on Facebook Marketplace for a shared cabin rental near the mountain lodge I worked at. I moved in because it was close to my job and already furnished. I just brought a duffel bag with my clothes and a few personal things. The room already had a bed and dresser. The guy renting the space was a retired forest ranger, probably in his late 60s, and his name was Walter. We didn't sign anything official. It was a verbal agreement where I paid rent weekly. Still, he was basically my roommate. Walter was very old school, didn't like technology, and kept to himself most of the time. The whole cabin was rustic but cozy, and for someone like me, trying to save up money, it was perfect. Point one night, after a long double shift, I came home completely exhausted. I crashed onto the bed and was out cold in seconds. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the creak of my bedroom door opening. A sliver of hallway light cut into the room, and standing in the doorway was Walter. His hands still on the knob, he said in a dry, gravelly voice, "Don't go near the root cellar." He added, "I know you've been down there." I sat up, groggy and confused, and told him I hadn't, because I genuinely hadn't. He stood there a moment longer, then slowly closed the door and walked away, the creaks of his footsteps descending the stairs. I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out if he was unstable or just dreaming. Either way, it made my skin crawl. The next day, I had the day off. Walter took his old pickup down the dirt road, probably heading into town. I was alone in the cabin. The moment I heard the truck disappear down the hill, I found myself standing in front of the cellar door. I'd seen him go down there before, so I knew that's what it was. Curiosity gnawed at me, especially after his strange warning that I opened the door slowly, creaked loudly. First, I only peeked down. It was completely dark, so I grabbed the flashlight hanging near the doorframe and made my way down the steep steps. At the bottom, I flipped a switch on the stone wall. The bulb above flickered to life. The room was mostly empty. Dirt floors, old tools, and some stacked crates. But tucked in the far corner was a wooden door with a metal latch. I hesitated, but walked over and pulled it open. It stuck at first. There was rubber weather stripping on the bottom, probably to seal in whatever was inside. What I found made my blood run cold. The room was tiny, barely enough to stand in, and reeked of decay. On the dirt floor were reddish-brown stains. Heavy-duty trash bags were stacked in a lumpy pile, shaped like they held something large and human. A long metal table stood under a hanging light, and above it, mounted in the corner, was a small security camera aimed at the workbench. I couldn't stay there another second. I took a quick photo on my phone and bolted back upstairs, gagging. I stuffed all my things into my bag and slung it over my shoulder. As I was zipping up the last pouch, I heard the screen door bang shut. Walter was back. I tried to stay calm and called out, "Hey, Walter," from the top of the stairs. He didn't answer. I heard the cellar door creak open and his boots stomping down. That was my cue. I didn't even grab my coat. I ran straight to my car, jumped in, and tore off down the gravel road. I drove 20 miles to my cousin's farmhouse and showed him the photo. He stared at me like I was nuts and asked why I hadn't already called the cops. So I did. I told 911 everything. That I was a temporary tenant and found something disturbing in Walter's cellar. I begged them to get a warrant before he had time to hide it all. A few hours later, a deputy came by the farm to get my statement and ID. I told them everything I knew. Later, they informed me that Walter had been arrested. He'd started clearing out the room, but the sheriff's team got there before he could finish. They didn't go into detail about what was in those bags, but I didn't need them to. I already knew it was my cousin let me stay with him for a few weeks while I found a new place. The whole thing still keeps me up some nights, knowing that I almost shared a home with a monster. I don't know how many of you have ever stayed at a boarding house, but for those who have, You probably remember that strange mixture of excitement and nervousness when stepping into your new room for the first time. That was me last year when I moved into a boarding house near the local art institute. I'd been assigned to share a room with a guy who was already living there for a semester. He was pale, had sandy brown hair, wore oversized hoodies even in warm weather, and spoke in a monotone voice that barely rose above a whisper. Nothing inherently wrong with any of that, but from the get-go, something just felt off. For this story, I'll call him Marvin. I greeted him and shook his hand when I arrived, and he gave me the limpest handshake imaginable. He didn't make eye contact and just mumbled something I couldn't understand. That evening, I went to introduce myself to some of the other boarders. I quickly found I clicked better with them than with Marvin. That first night was mostly about unpacking, settling in, and trying to make small talk. I attempted to get to know Marvin, but he barely responded, often with strange half-answers or unrelated statements. He turned off the light and went to bed around 9:30 p.m., which felt unusually early considering we didn't have early classes or obligations the next morning. I just put on my headphones and watched YouTube videos on my tablet until I drifted off. The next morning, I went to breakfast with some of the other boarders. When I came back, I noticed my suitcase had been shifted. Marvin was sitting on his bed, pretending to read, but I knew my stuff had been moved. I opened it and rummaged through it, trying to figure out what was missing. I couldn't quite pinpoint anything, but I swore something wasn't right. I asked Marvin if he went through my things. He snapped back, denying it in a tone that was way too aggressive for such a question. Of course, I couldn't prove anything. That night, I invited Marvin to join a small movie gathering some of us were having in the common area. He declined, saying he needed to stay caught up on coursework. I left him alone and went to hang out with the others. When I came back, Marvin was asleep already. It was pouring rain outside and thunder was booming. I stayed in bed, watching the storm through the window. Flashes lit the room periodically, which I thought was just lightning. It actually helped lull me back to sleep. When I woke up, I saw my backpack was moved this time, unzipped too. I didn't say anything. Instead, I decided I'd stay up the next night and pretend to be asleep just to see if anything weird would happen. The rain continued into the following day, a gloomy blanket over everything. That night, I stayed on my phone, barely blinking, listening to the sound of rain tapping the window. Around 2 a.m., I flipped to my side and closed my eyes halfway. I kept perfectly still. After what felt like forever, I noticed more flashes. 3 of them. I quickly rolled to my other side and caught Marvin dropping his phone to his lap. The flashes hadn't been lightning. They were from his camera. I asked him what he was doing, playing dumb. He stuttered and said he couldn't sleep. I acted like I believed him. The next day, I told some of the other boarders what had happened. They were all equally weirded out and encouraged me to talk to the house manager. I agreed. That afternoon, Marvin was gone, which was rare. I walked back into our room and saw his laptop open on the desk. I couldn't help myself. Peeked. His desktop was cluttered with files and pictures. I opened a few images and instantly felt sick. Photos of me sleeping. Dozens of them. Some with flash, others close up. Some were of my open suitcase and the inside of my backpack. I recorded a video of his screen, then deleted as many photos as I could find and shut the laptop. I immediately went to the manager's office, showed the video, and requested a new room. Thankfully, they took me seriously and arranged for me to move into a different room down the hall. I didn't know what disciplinary action Marvin faced, but I was set to switch rooms the next morning. That night, my last night in that shared room, I couldn't sleep. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I heard the floorboards creak and the rustle of his bedsheets. Then silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. That was until I heard a soft breath above me. He was standing right over my bed. I didn't dare turn over. Eventually, I heard the creak of his mattress as he lay back down. I didn't sleep another second. The next day, I moved into my new room. My new roommate was chill, easy to talk to. Complete contrast. But the memory of Marvin still lingers. The fact that he still probably has pictures of me on his phone. I don't know what he was planning or why he watched me like that. He was a total creep, and I was lucky to get away before it got worse. When I moved to a small coastal town for my first job after college, I didn't have many housing options. A friend of my mom's, Linda, offered to let me stay in her beachside duplex for a low rent since she was moving in with her boyfriend. There was a catch though. I'd have to share it with a tenant she found online to help cover costs. I needed a place quickly, so I agreed. The day I moved in, Linda introduced me to the tenant. Her name was Margaret, and she looked to be in her late 60s. It felt strange, living with someone who could easily be my grandmother. The duplex was fully furnished, so I only brought my mattress and a small wardrobe. The weirdness began on the second night. I was scrolling on my phone in the living room when Margaret suddenly peeked her head around the corner from the kitchen. She stared at me silently, her eyes locked on mine, and then began whispering indecipherable words under her breath. "Margaret, are you all right?" I asked. She gave a guttural sigh and slowly backed out of sight. I immediately texted Linda and asked if Margaret had a history of mental health issues. Linda said she didn't know much about her. They only met once when Margaret responded to a rental ad. When I described what just happened, Linda was shocked but didn't have any answers. The next morning, I found Margaret in the kitchen frying eggs. She greeted me with a chipper good morning, and I cautiously asked if she was okay the night before. She looked confused. When I mentioned the muttering and the stare, she just blinked and said, "I don't remember any of that." Later that week, I was lying in bed, watching a movie on my laptop. The lights were off. Suddenly, there was a knock on my bedroom door. I muted the audio and listened closely. The same low moaning sounds I heard before were coming from the hallway that I felt frozen. The door was unlocked, but she didn't come in. The knocking and noises continued for what felt like a full minute before they finally stopped. I heard her shuffle away down the hall. That night, I barely slept that I woke up again in the middle of the night, expecting it to be early morning, but the room was still dark. The clock read 1:40 a.m. I sat up slightly and heard a faint creak on the floor. There was someone standing at the foot of my bed. "Margaret?" I said, voice shaking. She didn't respond, only made those haunting, breathy moans. I turned on the bedside lamp. She was there. Her thin white hair was messy. Her eyes looked glazed, and in her hand, she held a long kitchen knife. I screamed and backed into the corner of the bed, but she just stood there, mumbling and swaying. Before slowly walking out of the room, I jumped up and pushed my dresser in front of the door. I tried calling Linda, but she didn't answer. All I could do was wait until sunrise at 8 a.m. I finally reached Linda and explained everything. She was horrified. She rushed over that afternoon, and when she confronted Margaret, the older woman looked genuinely confused and sorry. She claimed she didn't remember any of it. Linda promised to start the eviction process, but warned me it could take months. She suggested I move out immediately, and I agreed. Later that day, Linda did some research and suspected Margaret might be suffering from sundowning syndrome, a condition common in elderly people with dementia that causes agitation and confusion after sunset. That it chills me to think that in her confused state, Margaret may have truly intended to harm me. I was lucky nothing happened, but I won't ever forget the look in her eyes under that dim light, like something else entirely was staring back at me. If these creeped you out, like and subscribe for more disturbing real stories. Sleep tight.